Hello, America, I'm begging you. Not the way, I can explain this better than anyone. For example, about how James Madison and what really caused the Boston Tea Party. All exceptions and exception nature that appears to be in demonstration of other are really in demonstration of that being true. And that not denying all exceptions, not the slightest exceptions, not sequence true. Which is this is a native defense, which the name chief is partially what in communications of. Before, while being that, and from beyond that, per nature itself, that is true. So that must be true. Therefore, we have to be on the same page. For example, all journalists they have the right to treat questions in how they want. But there are exceptions to that they were and are valuing denied, as the branches of governments were and are since before our founding. Simultaneously, in relationship to our identity of volume, humanity as an identity of volume, that is individual / group / species identity of volume / S. See, what physical difference is? The subject that all ones are in conjunction to is the identity of relativity science. Using what is true always, not denying exceptions, and as exceptions. As what is true also. That is an identity that is attached to reason, that is attached to mind, that is attached to logic. I am not a doctor. This is also recorded evidence their roles with fabricating audio and video, with identities of nations, because identities of locations, areas, and states, every single one of the entire identity of the grounds of this entire species. Before it was sophistication. The whole time it was sophistication of any type, and prevented it, and that worse than obfuscated out of. This is, in other words, in relationship to identity of the grounds, infrastructure means to it how much anything afford everything for the the materials to work with, and the companies and the way everything relates. This was engineered, and with the extortion roles that originally still worse than witch trials, because everyone distinctly, every identity of the ground distinctly is a victim. For what really most furthers the overt criminal enterprises, the private ones, a whole bunch of nations, as people of no matter where they came from, here or there, and how mixed. People who try to be good and stuff like that. It's where everyone's speaking through others. And they're saying, okay, good is a theater towards these branches, or these counters to the branches of every country. The executive branch, the judicial branch, and the political branch of government, of the tree that is metaphorically the republic for which we stand, but this was criminally foreign influenced since semi-ancient times, since before modern nations' religions. Proofs of this are also where and how it is actually recorded as how the sciences and their identity of the ground relationship locations further. Everyone's identity of the ground location. This kept live progressions needed that are in collusion, because it kept correlation nature, needed to self-value what was fit for them by the identity of sophistication that was more finite than the quality of fact-cheaping nature, identities of jobs and of titles that the breaching method entrenched in America since before America's founders only permitted, and that sustained. So, and it mixed it super sickly distinctly against every group part of this conversation that is native pure. And this even divided Native Americans from Native Americans because it took everyone from their identity ground relationship as their actual preservation and means to it as extensions of the identity of evolution that is native pure, no matter who you are. That's what we're talking about. That engineering of why we are individual grouped in species that wasn't invented. That identity of reality that is making more and more of its reality, where it's ours is positive or negative to it as a quality of diffusion, where we are automatically positive. Value progression. We're making more and more negative value nature progression. Science reveals. Science can observe. We are, as an identity of species, individually grouped and together, countries, nations, territories, criminally foreign influenced, self-valued criminally foreign influence, as victims for a method, an archetypal organized crime method, an archetypal criminal enterprise. A criminal enterprise, I am not a lawyer. I'm not a police form. I'm not a judge, obviously. But correlation nature and how knowledge is being used by all the identities of the science, all the identity of the ground locations, the bar itself, private lawyer simultaneously, originally and still. Correlation nature has many means to discern here. See, but we have to be able to counter the sequence shifts, because where people are pretending to be about positive and negative, and with passions and emotions, honestly, it's in relationships to subjects parted, and that all the reactions were not just, in other words, in relationship to those laws that were grounded to all the identity of the ground locations. With slavery, not just with slavery. Understand what that was. It's sustained against everyone, the slavery, sickly distinctly. And what was for not just because it was then for now, because it was exploited, where everyone were engineered. Fact-cheaping nature styles with that, even to people's selves, as a certain kind of victim to what keeps collusion with itself. Recorded how the overt criminal enterprises, the private ones originally still for self-valued victim predators themselves on paper, victims, but victim predators. But see, that connects with a theater that is called politics, where they have fake sides as parties, and where they have alternatives and collusion, where they have debates and fights, where they left out their roles with all like locations, where and how we have to describe this. See, but how what they did was keep roles with another method of predicate acts delivery system method of maintaining self-value roles with criminally foreign influenced locations, all of them designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures everywhere that is not overtly tactically denatured in relationship to the breaching method that was entrenched in America since before our founding parents were born, without free speech, and having to hide, have to play the theater that was forced to all voices, and having been forced to all voices, where and how they engineered not just overtly sick and insidiously sick negatives, sustained against everyone, sickly distinctly too. In fact, cheap nature as the identity. What is nature? Identity. One identity or volume is inseparable from all others. But to observe this, we have to speak about what is simultaneous. And so, like, where they train people to speak about what is simultaneous with computers, they're training people to mimic that, and that's great. But there's this science, for example, that is native pure. And, defenses of that as a abridged constitution, those are victims. They're just taking science that they have, like niched out. It's a abridged groundings to where we are fact cheap nature as volume, as value as nature / nature's value, which is also discernible. This is volume science, and this is observable. See, volume theory is where is being used to worse than obfuscate correlation nature for motivations real and or made up. Relevant to how all identity of the ground locations and how the concentrated value / value relationship to the identity of value / value progression, that is native pure as our species. See, they made Native Americans other because they engineered all to memory, all modern nations, to memory and to narratives and defenses of it, of narratives about the ancients and about the semi-ancients, and then about the time of modern religions in latter semi-ancient times, and then modern times in the form of that past, when it was modern, when it was active. See, we are this identity of volume / S because of how one identity of volume, its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that is where and how its identity of volume only increases. As with the ancients revealed English demonstrably to teach, was a forever nature, and nature is identity. And we have this shared identity of volume / S. That is value as nature / nature as value simultaneously. Where and how we are a quality of diffusion. Where and how we are temporary positive. Where and how we are simultaneously temporary / lasting positive or negative, being made from that temporary already perfect world, positive. See, we have the phrase the perfect world because used by many, involved with where and how we used remotely or all identity of the ground locations, including the branches of government, every modern nation. Now, when people use short words like that, what they do is value rules with where and how investigators, and vetting involved identities. No, on paper, since before computers, in relationship to databases since before computers. We are space / existence. Space and existence are a semi-nature relationship to one identity of value / value progression. Science reveals this. See, but we have sciences offensively, pretending passions and emotions, all private and overt criminal enterprises. So then defenses of that, we have the all investigators, the training of that, every age and nature of campus, all private at the same time. This is a method that is mixed in with all kinds of people's real emotions and passions and things they see and don't and make up and what, but also how they're all how that's connected to identity thefts and frauds method that is overt / insidious. Relevant, for example, anytime anyone makes opinions about color, even the color of the law. But I mean, which is something I read in Black's Law Dictionary. Color, I mean, where that predicate acts delivery system method, that human fact cheapening nature breaching method, that made those crazy laws and made them enforced. Database relationships, identity the ground relationships, per what was where they had counters to overt sickly things like war, relevant to what is simultaneously actually as human beings, actually as wanted and needed uses of our identity / S, as its engineering. That identity of value / value progression, that inventions work or not in relationship to it. So America and other nations, I want to do this in a way so we have to realize how every modern nation, hundreds of nations at once, in all locations, areas, and states of those nations, how everyone's identity was self-value, having been and being completely possessed. And not just that, but exploitations of defenses of blaming other things, others themselves. The breaching methods rolls with that. And then they're going to defend that. They engineered hundreds of nations at once, self-value, reactions to sustained evils in semi-ancient times. That requires fact-cheating nature reorientation of the only positions capable of being stability in relationship to hundreds of nations at once, worse than incapable of being fact-cheating nature counters to what really causes the negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures with their locations, areas, and states that they and with their neighbors. That really that causes it. This is fluent through our countries. So we have to understand the identity of the ground and positive as a science, where there is no theory. And so we're going to have to enter the sciences, where the people know more than us. But we could use correlation nature to show where and how you could see. There is an identity, you could discern the identity that the sciences share, differentially especially, too. For example, they made those laws. We're supposed to be having this conversation about the invisible but still discernible, which is what, before criminally foreign influence, science is only having been capable of being, for where and how every person is a great person. See, but every person has sustained bad things on them. Every identity of the ground location, fact-cheating nature-oriented things. And there is conjunction to them. And where and how there is conjunction to them. There are all kinds of motivations for evil and for fake positive in collusion with it. Fake positive as criminal insidiousness natures of positive. In fact, treatment nature styles, premises treatments, sequence treatments, identity treatments, finite fact treatments, active, progressive. So they are preventing and having prevented mandated law, good people, because of how this is a method that sustains exploitations of already being and having been used as victim, predator, identity, ground locations in collusion with themselves. All locations, all branches of government, all conjunctions to other nations known. But further, it is critical to understand how James Madison is the cause, and his plan was the cause for which is to liberate the identity of the surface values of the Constitution and of the Declaration of Independence from theater positive treatments in collusion with overtly / insidiously criminally foreign influenced positive treatments where they have takes on American history, where that is employed as fact treatment nature to be exploited and having been exploited. Where all identity ground locations in the branch, they're all in collusion with fabricating audio and video, with people getting killed, with bad things that are keeping killers ready to kill. Where and how also this is completely fact treatment nature oriented. And this is preventing and having prevented mandated law. And where and how they have their family members, the extended family members of everyone, even along routes and things like that. So they invest people through time to what the phenomena we could observe because of FBI recorded, confessed, and demonstrated by the media. Note, for example, this is related to the branches of government individually grouped and together already having been used remotely by what knew that they would have to hide lie progressions and have to, by self-valuing, means to get away with doing it the way they've been doing it in relationship to where they have fact treatment nature relationships to all locations. This built, people are incapable of even understanding impartiality because they have interbranch and foreign in collusion with what needs to what could easily with self-values, wars, nuclear proliferation, types of jobs and natures of jobs that never liberated. I have to be stuck fake more and more. So all our energy becomes more and more negative value progression. Lethal Hadith, one little species forced from Earth's distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous relationship to its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that where more of more forever nature is being made. Us as our own experience. Heaven and hell came from where we are temporary positive, per this science. That came from before modern nations' religions, religious messengers. And that's why, for example, the first part of the Quran and the first part of the Old Testament, everyone freaks out when you start trying to bring a quality of fact treatment nature to all that is demonstrated self-value roles with illusions relevant to sequence shifts associated with the most important part of the Old Testament, which is shorter than the New Testament, but that's never talked about because people can't defend that, and their takes on practicality, and their takes on positive and negative, and their takes on identity, and on others' names, and on sequence. So you have to understand what is actually recorded is the phenomena how I could explain this to you. But so we have the passions and emotions of people who want outside of court to use that in conjunction with where and how they already fabricated audio and video with the media at the same time. And that's relevant to how they have all these other nations, and they're all needing to counter things as fact-cheaping nature. We're hundreds of nations at once entertaining what we've entertained, as that was forced, where our founding parents still didn't have free speech. George Washington had to come to Connecticut, CT, right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War, and secure help with the French general through a meeting in Wethersfield, Connecticut. And that obviously helped us with no country, a whole bunch as in other words, the founding of our nation, like others. Watch what they did. Don't forget what they did to the Native Americans against Native Americans first. And that had been sustained since before our founding parents had been born. They had brought humanity into a negative value nature progression, engineered it only capable of not discerning what was exploiting them, blaming on other things other than themselves, wrongly. The real cause of negative value nature progressions, acts of natures, sequence shift, then defending that as fact-cheaping nature. Defending takes on positive and negative, and on time treatments. That can't defend that and afford anyone to use mandated law to demonstrate uses of the identities of each branch. When they bring up topics like the police, for example, it's evidence. Like how long you guys are going to use the right to free speech to control questions and things like that, to fabricate, audio and video, to cover up fabrication of audio and video with locations about people. And see, that is, again, with a whole bunch of other nations that kept and keep this. Where and how our people, like with the DeMorrow family, other people at Central Connecticut State University recorded, confessed, and demonstrated, as some of the people associated with a Phil Cololo. I never saw them together. A Phil Cololo is one of the ones that are Bob Chase. And so they also have sick people that go after the mayors and things, and go after the police. So where and how because those sick movements, like for example, there was a story, even if the whole thing was made up, this wasn't true anyway, because this is associated, for example, all these lies that WFSB pretended about me into databases. They attached my family to a whole bunch of things they didn't say. They also did this with judges and with more people involved, with already having been proven in the Ninth Circuit Court right before the World Trade Center attack. Documents had been post-dated from inside the Ninth Circuit. Also, the nature of the communications between the parties is in relationship to where they have uses of, classified and declassified, even if just through theater. I mean, it's recorded, the correlation per that. Some they have uses of evidence and things in relationships where no one addressed, where the identity of early America, for example, sequence true, it was complete possession of that predicate act delivery system method, that human fact human nature breaching method that only allowed rules with slavery in the North and South. So George Washington had to leave slavery in the North. And that's very simple and fast to understand. And he had to leave it here in Wethersfield, Connecticut, meeting the French general here, entering the role right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War. That's what enabled it. We had to have help. This predicate acts delivery system method knew we would have to have help. James Madison preempted this, though, because they were doing it in a way. So, and that preemption is relevant to what really caused the Boston Tea Party. Is how everyone was forced. See, we don't have free speech because we don't have a sequence true while we have the branches of government. It's already they want to debate if they because we don't have the right to sue the government, but we shouldn't have to sue to have the government fix the fake recorded audio and video that has been stacked in their databases. Because it is relevant, former director of the FBI, former standing chairperson on Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organization Act, Robert Luskin, and his lawyer, Robert Cheverry, and on Farmington Avenue, note down the street from the Harriet Beecher Stowe Mark Twain House. These are people involved with prosecutors and judges that are involved with the people with overt criminal enterprises, actually, not just like the people that train them to be. How many nations we have that have left what the means for any individual group or together companies what they could afford to do for locations that are really small. If we let this native science, the one that is in a conjunction to all identity ground locations, have its quality of fact keeping nature, and in relationship to that answer /S to what caused slavery. It's all right if someone wants to debate that. It's all right if they have physical delusions. But we have state delusions to address. But those were our breaching method employed. So we have to treat this as a predicate acts delivery system method. That was imposed against France, and that was imposed against America, and that was imposed against England. But where and how they were our fact-keeping nature, where there was no position allowed, fathomed, here or there, to speak for the human nature, honestly. And see, this method knew from semi-ancient times, since before modern nations' religions, greatly about this, but not letting the sequence true. This is also about how they know. There are proofs that they know. We're supposed to discern. You're supposed to free individuals' voices about what it's actually about because of the sequence true. First part of the Old Testament says, all you have to know is understand right here, up to right here. This is about where the sciences share an identity. Now, each letter of the English language spells out a word, and each word spells out a sentence. And so we could monetize this for an approach to afford the communications devices to reach out to the locations that are most forsaken, and where the how it was fact human nature having been and being sustained by what was is not the cause of anyone, but as fact human nature it was is self-valued by everyone. So to discern this, you have to have mandated law followed outside of courts. But the courts and interbranch, they have been roles with investigations of investigators and vetting identities. And roles everyone's family members interbranch, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. For example, as what then needs to hide uses of the role of uses of self-valued roles as pseudo-sophistication, valuing more and more, discorrelation with each identity, the ground location. I shouldn't be rough with the name of a guy in Hartford who was it with the principal. But when you can't get, that's tied to sequence shifts with this. The conversations, that was online. I never met him, for example. They don't let people be perfect because they have uses of words like slash values like behavior, where and how they have been making allegations as courts that weren't supposed to make allegations against people, for example. So we have criminally foreign influence readings of the law, uses of identity, the ground locations, and collusion with those people carrying what is self-valued being and having been manufactured, where a predicate act delivery system causes negative value nature progressions, acts and natures. Natures like criminal insidiousness natures, acts like predicate acts. We are being prevented counters to predicate acts, identity thefts, and frauds. Now, where you have groups, if the group, if one person says one thing and another person says, "Oh, I didn't know about that," the group is saying other than what did they say, regardless of what they say. So a person that is being hurt by one of the group, if they're defending their identities regardless, police forms, courts, the sick people hurt in the courts, like with the burning a court. All they're doing is in collusion with the fact-keeping nature, where the overt criminal enterprises and the private ones are kept by worse the courts themselves and the police forms themselves need to defend their treatments of time, fact-keeping nature, all identity, ground locations, people's names, reactions to what they hear, how they interpret their obligations. That was all employed by a breaching method before uses of employment. More finite than three identities of zero and greater than infinity is what leads. The rest precedes. So we could use pantheism as the identity of the identity slash S of the human body, of the human species identity of volume slash S. I taught best boxing. So I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer. The cell nucleus, the cell body, and the cell wall, they are manifest. and demonstration of one, how there are 1/3/5 identities. Identities of sequence nature that are one. Identity of sequence nature of simultaneous nature making more and more of itself, as sequence nature is only negative value nature, where and how it's not simultaneous nature, and where and how it's not that conjunction to the identity that inventions work or not in relationship to it. They are further positive or not in relationship to it. So what slavery is about simultaneously requires, increasingly, needs for uses of words like criminal insidiousness, needs for uses of words like nature, and for a definition of it as identity, as identity's relationship to itself, and as the value of that increasing simultaneously, where one identity of volume/S is invisible but is still discernible. It is an identity of relationship to all parts of English grammar and of other languages, where and how we are space/existence, where space and existence are semi-nature relationships, with the slash too, to itself. There is to its trinity. This is ancient sciences were criminally foreign influenced by a method that no one fathomed. No one fathomed that anyone would want to cause nature, being its identity, to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. This is in relationship to the tactic and the method/S by what used slavery. And this is inseparable from where and how the fact-achieving nature of James Madison, he had to hide his role. George Washington had to hide his role completely. See, if it is true that George Washington said that he cannot tell a lie, it is him that don't chop down the cherry tree. There are Connecticut, CT. He had to come here to Connecticut. Hartford is right next to us. Short horse ride from Wethersfield, Connecticut at the time. What is now Trinity College, for example, used to be George Washington College. Hartford Hospital. In 1822, they had the Institute of Living. So that's one of the psychology places. Now we know simultaneously people that were entertaining those natures of law, that were criminally foreign influenced, tactically criminally foreign influenced. We're going to examine how it was for their fact-achieving nature. And so the greatest negative things, it's not just they make negative out of positive out of negative. These are systems that were engineered for people to make positive out of negative. But stay roles, stay styles, relevant to where anyone who's trying to use the short words to use of logic to protract them, and with sequence true, use the in other words. That's evidence. Where how this is people are in collusion with worse than worse. Right through. I saw on a video, an HBO guy was interviewing the president, and I know everybody is freaking out now. And I want us to see the president's, all the administrations as one, and the Native American chiefs simultaneously. And I want us to use opinions and convictions that are strong enough No, in other words, that we're all on the same. We all agree about it, and they're extensive. We don't counter racism. We address, even if you proof of it is, even if that is true, you have to count that subject if you want to treat it with the proper quality of fact-cheating nature, of leadership, of humanity, of ethics. You have to treat it with, I forgot what we were saying. In other words, you have to use pantheism as led by the identity that inventions work or not in relationship to it. They are further positive or not in relationship to it. So a criminal insidiousness nature is obviously going to have different takes on what is positive or negative. Not just where the locations where they have to. Further illusions against themselves, as that native system denied by a criminally foreign influence one. See, what were witch trials about? Whenever witch trials, even if they were totally made up, we are obligated to keep that inseparable from what slavery is about. What are they about at the same time? Even especially if it was made up. For example, they're about predicate acts delivery system method. They're about roles with where and how the human fact-cheating nature. All identity of the ground, locations, areas, and states. They were victims of a sustained fact-cheating nature exploitation method that kept and knew it would keep people only capable of reacting as fact-cheating nature and as simultaneous nature, self-valuing sequence shifts as victims, not realizing for time reasons, all kind of bad reasons and good reasons. So forget about it, because people aren't gonna obsess on things, and they're gonna pretend people they do pretend people obsess on things when they're trying to have mandated law followed, and where and how the branches of government individually grouped and together, their identities of thought, their identities of time treatments, fact treatments, all victim predators. They can't defend that and afford to have demonstrated, for example, where and how the people burning down the courts, and where and how the overt criminal enterprises and the private ones and all these nations are kept needing to hide live aggressions tied to their roles with what uses all locations for a fact-cheating nature method that keeps all other used that no one knew, not even them, but then they self-evaluate into context where we have our only sophistication of fact-cheating nature, kept criminally foreign influence database relationships and private. So what is this when we have to speak about the proofs of it? That's where mandated law has to be followed outside of courts. Because this is recorded where investigators, and vetting identities. They needed to self-value, correlation nature hurt. And they needed to simultaneously pretend other, individually grouped and together, in relationship to the recorded criminally foreign influence fact-cheating nature racketeering and cover-up of it outside of courts, which is really evidence racketeering. Whatever, it was worse than that. It's worse than war crimes. But it's a whole bunch of nations at once. And they're all sickly, distinctly hurt. So they all have means to blame, individually grouped and together, other things, others, and selves, for what keeps individually grouped and together. Self-valued, fact-cheaping nature, truths, and identity truths that are completely possessed, as sophistication incapable of defending itself and of what exploits that. The people that run the prisons, all people that tied to service everything. These are hundreds of nations that are shared. They're real and made up motivations for evil and for fake care. Like for fake positive, as criminal ceaseless natures of positive, in collusion with overtly and with simultaneously insidious natures of life progression cover-ups, natures of victims that didn't know how to react, and a whole bunch of people didn't at the same time. So they just value, not by accident, means to hide that when they have needs to, in relationship to where and how. It's easily how they keep each position, each location, area, and state, each science, as identity of the ground, discorrelation, collusion, criminal and ceaseless natures of positive and negative, and styles as logic, defenses that collusion, or worse natures of uses of the identity thefts and frauds, which is the subject. Again, where and how we are this quality of diffusion as a value/value progression. This is why we have to walk and why we have to travel, actually. But this engineering was set up since before our founding parents were born. The houses and suburbs, there are not even, since before cars. Suburbs that were designed, what they call advancement, note leaving out what is most probable and what is demonstrable, per the role still with the criminally foreign influence database relationships. Fact, cheaping nature through treatments, uses of positive and negative. No one wanted slavery. And black people and white people can see this distinctly and not distinctly. For example, but where this quality of fact-cheaping nature is prevented, black people and white people, they're pretending to be integrity together. Every modern nation, their identities of the law can't defend themselves and afford our short words. And so they definitely can't afford them protracted. If we use the identity that is true always, also has exceptions, not denying exceptions. So when you have branches of government involved with identity thefts with locations, more and more you have them with locations involved with that. Then they make people perceive, that's not to say, they make, in other words, so they even have overtly fake Facebook pages pretending to be me online, as people also, it's recorded how they use exploitations of their insights into the family members and the sensibilities of people in ways not fathomed. And this is again, President Trump said nuclear proliferation is probably the most. Of course it is. Think about that. Then we have to have natures of jobs, all these different countries that are all defense, like don't think. And in this context, we never even had American history liberated from criminal and insidious natures of positive and collusion with criminal criminal insidious natures of overt negative, pretended other, as treatments of it, as victims, where and how victim predators were propagated by that predicate acts delivery system method that put those crazy slavery laws sustained against everyone. Fact treatment nature oriented complete possession of all identity ground locations, all jobs, all titles. No one fathomed me. If they play the trap of the roads of identity of relationship to the native value/value progression, other systems other than its own, nature will continue to demonstrate negative value nature progressions, action natures. And people will have to respond to that as fact treatment nature. Not knowing how to properly, not by accident, and by collusion with a fake positive, for example, relevant criminal ceaseless nature of positive, because victims, where they have types of experts on things, they're reliant upon short words and upon long words and premises treatment, sequence treatments, identity treatment, such that can't defend that and afford anyone to use what is actually recorded. True always, as all exceptions, not deny exception nature. So there's a phenomenon where the interbranch, the foreign, and the overt criminal enterprises in the private one were all individually grouped in together, not fathoming what really put that together. What really keeps them, roles, needs, and natures that were they locked into words they're misinterpreting now. For example, with the World Trade Center victims, they're using them for what they wouldn't want to be used for, because of how investigators and vetting identities interbranch and foreign were in collusion with all locations. And so they keep needing to hide that. All campuses of each age and nature. This is also how they have private campuses and people from private public schools in other towns that are involved with their stacking falsified police reports and fake things into databases. And there are proofs that this is not even the faults of the teachers. So they've been fabricating audio and video. They've been fabricating sequences. They've been roles with identity thefts and frauds. Timed obfuscations. Timed fake care help for people at each age of fact-cheating nature. Through motivations, natures, needs, interests, fathomable by them, observable by them, made up by everyone, but not that originally and still. The subject, that which pretends to be able to afford things, but the standards left and leave out, even though the solutions don't hurt anyone. If we made more food, which helps the farmers. We make admission of the overtly, tactically, criminally foreign influenced identity ground locations. To do this is that quality of fact-cheating nature. You cannot separate that from the suburban pathology, which is better than that. But since before our founding parents were born, breaching method employed, slavery method employed, designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. propagated to defend.